Let's talk about getting your app onto the home screen without going through the App Store. So we're going to talk about setting up the InDesign file to make this happen. And then we'll look at how you actually create responsive layouts so that your app can display differently as the device rotates, or you can also create a multi-device app so you can have different size layouts for those different devices. Then we'll look at how you use In5 to export to a web app. And I will talk about exactly what a web app is and what exactly that means for creating mobile apps and why you don't have to go through the App Store when you're creating a web app. And when we export, we'll have a set of files, and I'll show you exactly what to do with those files to get it onto the home screen of the iPad, iPhone, Android device. And I'll show you a few ways that we use to actually test the files as we're creating them. So you'll be able to do that as well. And it'll save you some time and energy instead of going through the whole process of using a physical device. Obviously, you want to test it eventually there, but there's some faster ways to do that as you're building your app. And then stick around toward the end. There's a lot of stuff we're not going to be able to cover in the session today. So I've got some additional links at the end. Things like if you want to get into actually creating the interactivity in InDesign, the specifics of that, I'll have links on that, for example, and some other things like where you can set up hosting and that kind of thing. And of course, we'll leave plenty of time for question and answer, and I'll stick around as long as you have questions to ask. So let's first talk about why you would want to avoid the App Store. If you've never dealt with the App Store, this is a quick kind of primer on how painful it can be. So normally the process of creating a mobile app means that you're programming. You're programming in a heavier language than what you would do to create a website. So you'd be programming in like Objective-C for iOS or Java for Android. So those are pretty intensive programming languages, not something you pick up pretty quickly, and probably not something you want to pick up at all if you're a designer. So you might have to hire somebody to do that. And then you have this process of signing up as for example, an Apple developer, and you get a certificate from them. You have to download that. You have to attach it to your app as your app is built. And then you have to go through a submission process to get your app into the App Store. And there are a lot of different things that can preclude you from having your app approved in the App Store. For example, Apple doesn't really like apps that look like magazines. They might rather have that in their bookstore. They don't like self-promotion, so that changes a lot of things. They don't. Well, you're not necessarily going to want private apps in the App Store, things you want to distribute in your company. So we'll talk about that with web apps, and at the end in the resource section, I'll mention some other stuff you want to look at if you're distributing internally. So stick around for that. So if you want to follow along and test the features with us, you can do this as we go along, but you might want to pay attention and just save this link for later. If you're not already using In5, you can download a copy of it at in5.us, and it's a feature limited trial, so you can use it for as long as you want. It just has limited features, but it will allow you to test the web app features that I am showing today. So let's take a look at creating the file with InDesign. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to get into the specifics of creating interactivity in InDesign today because we have a whole bunch of other stuff on that. I'll provide you with some links at the end. But this is the starting InDesign file. And this is something that I had designed years ago. And then I just had it refreshed by a designer to have a new look. But I say that because if I were designing it now, I would have done it a little bit differently. And I'll show you what I mean by that as we get into creating the responsive layout. So this is a single page in InDesign. And you can see when I hover over this, there's a dotted line around it. That's indicating that this is a multi-state object. So I'm going to go into the object states, which is found under Window Interactive. And that shows me all these different states. So if I click through them, you can see first I've got a neutral state where nothing has been clicked. And then I can click through each state and see the button is highlighted and there's different content. And then within here, this content, for example, might have animation, and that loads when the state loads. So you kind of see those transitions when we look at the output. And going back to the object states, I'll just show you the other states here. So this is really handy. I wanted to control the transitions when I initially designed it, so I built it as a single page with object states. Now, when I wanted to update this and make it responsive, because In5 now supports responsive layouts, if I were rethinking this from scratch, I probably would have designed each of these sections as a different page, because then it would be much easier to create a second layout, and the two layouts would then be parallel. So if I switch between them, it would keep the section that I'm on. And you'll see that when we get to the output. It's not a big deal because that's something I do for testing. I'm switching between layouts, but most users aren't constantly switching between portrait and landscape. But it's just something I want you to be aware of, because there is some thought that goes into setting these up. And then, of course, each of these inside here are buttons. So you can see in the buttons and forms panel that it's setting some visibility here, and it's also going to a particular state. And again, this probably would be simpler if I'd done this out in pages, but there is some complexity with dealing with object states. So again, at the end, I'm going to mention some lessons so you can dive into working with multi-state objects if you haven't done it before. The one thing I do want to show with this is how to make this responsive. And I want to mention what you want to think about as you are creating a document for a web app. So a web app, and I'll show you an existing one here. This at the top has this black bar with the time, the date, the charge, the Wi-Fi. That you want to factor in to your design. So in this case, I'm doing the typical old school iPad layout of 1024 by 768. And what I just want to do with each layout is subtract 20 pixels for that bar at the top. So keep that in mind as we're creating that. And one simple way to make your life easier when starting out is to use a document preset. When you install In5, even if you're just using the demo version, it comes with all of these document presets. And there are iPad web app setups that you can use. So if you just want to start out with, say, the horizontal layout, open that up, and you can see that it's 1024, but then it's subtracted 20 pixels from the height, so it's 748. You don't even have to think about it there. And you just say, okay, and now you have a starting document to work with. So that's a great way to get started, is to use those document presets that come installed with In5. Now, I'm already working with this document. I've already got that screen size. And what I want to do is to create an alternate layout. That alternate layout is going to be the vertical version. So it's going to use the landscape as a source, but we're going to create the portrait version. So I actually want the width to be 768 by default. InDesign is going to just switch these over, and then I need to subtract 20 from the height. So that's going to be 1004. And then I can just click OK. And then that will take a moment and it will create a second layout. I'm just going to expand my pages panel so you can see there's another layout. And what it did was create that page size. Let me zoom out. And then it just copied this content. Now, this is the reason I was saying, if I were doing this now, I would have designed this as multiple pages, because now I have to go in to every state and edit this. And actually, I want to rethink the layout for this portrait version. I want to optimize for that layout. And so this is not necessarily the best way to do it, but this is the way that I did do it with this file, because I just didn't want to do it all over again. So I went about and did that. And let me show you one thing that might make it just a little bit easier in some cases. So I'm just going to undo creating that alternate layout. And I want to show you under the In5 menu, there's also a build wizard for a layout. It's called the Magic Layout Builder. And it's essentially exactly like the dialog we just looked at, where you can create an alternate layout. But this one will use InDesign's adjust layout feature. And so it'll do a little bit better job of shifting things. And we can try this out and see how it looks. I'm not sure it's going to look much different in this case, because everything was in a multi-state object. But I'll just show you, this is an alternative. So actually it did do a slightly better job. So you can see this, this actually fits on the page. So this might be a better starting point if you're creating those. Now I'm going to jump to the finished version so you can see what I did. I actually redesigned this landscape page. And so here's the menu, and I designed it to come up as animation. The specifics aren't super important, but what I want you to see is that I've thought it out differently. And so it's just going to look a little bit better on the horizontal screen. The menu, instead of coming up on the side, is a pop-up, and I can hide it and you can see what the content underneath looks like. So that's what it's going to look like in the portrait version. So let's take a look at exporting. I'm gonna export this finished version. There is an easy way to do it. Let's start with that. I go up to In5 and choose Easy Export Wizard. The Easy Export Wizard basically gives you a choice of things you're making. So in this case, we're making a web app. So I could just click Next, choose a font setting. So I choose Pixel Perfect, and then I give it a name, and I just click Export Now, and that does it for me. Now that's really easy, which is great, and that is a great way to test. Now what I want to show you is what it would take if you wanted to make some customizations, which we're going to do. Under the In5 menu, there's also the full export option, and that gives you a full dialog. Now I can access it directly from there, or I can give myself a head start by using the Easy Export Wizard. So you saw that I already chose web app. So let me click Advanced, and what that's going to do is bring up these choices with, for example, the web app down here already selected. So it's a multi-device web app. I could choose to make it specific to the iPad if I wanted to limit it there, iPhone or Android, but the multi-device lets me use any of those. And what you'll see is that choice adds installation instructions to help the user install. This also automatically detected responsive layouts from the export wizard. So it's going to stitch these together and only show them when it's appropriate. You'll see that in the output. And then I can make some customizations. Maybe I want to render the text as SVG, so it's nice and sharp regardless on these high def devices. And then in the advanced, let's say I want a custom icon. So I am going to go in here. I created an icon in Illustrator, and it looks like this. It's just a WA for web app, exported as a PNG. So I'll click Open, and then that gets assigned as that. The one other thing I'll mention, which shows up here, is caching. You can cache these offline. It has to be saved to the home screen and then open once and fully loaded for the caching to work. But there is this caching here, and there are some size limitations with that, and we can go over that in the Q&A, but I want to bring it up because this is something that probably is going to be helpful to you as you're creating web apps. So now to export with the customizations, I'll just click OK. And obviously I've already done that, so save us some time, and let's just take a look at what it looks like in the web browser. So here it is on your desktop computer. And what it does is say, you need to open this with your mobile device. So if I click here, it will open an email to me that I can send to my mobile device to open this. And then if I open this on a mobile device, I will get a different screen, and we're going to see that momentarily. But the trick to get it on the mobile device is that it has to be on a web server. So this file right here is on my local computer. You can tell I have a file path, and it also says file right here. So this, I can't send this to somebody, and I can't pass it along to my mobile device. I can't open it on my tablet. So the way we're going to do that today is to use TinyHost. I will share instructions on how to do this. Sort of the typical way is to use FTP, which is great, and I use that all the time. Also, in the Q&A, if you're interested, we could talk about how you do this with local testing, because I actually do this on my local computer. I can just spin up an instance of a local server and run it here, and what it says is localhost at the top, and I can load that on my iPad simulator. So we can get into that in the Q&A if you want to, but it's actually just really crazy easy to use TinyHost. So I'm going to go to my files. Let's take a look at what it looks like when we output. So you'll get this HTML5 output folder, and inside that is an index file. That's your HTML, and then all the things that go with it. So there's a cache file, there's a manifest, but these are all tucked inside the assets folder, along with the CSS, the images, and the JavaScript. And of course, any media if you've got audio or video. The one thing I'll mention that will probably change, so for the entire time that M5 has existed, you could do this with, the only thing on your top level would be HTML and the assets folder. Because of changes happening to devices, we are probably going to need to add a file here. So there's going to be a service worker JavaScript file at the top level that will handle caching, because a lot of the browsers are deprecating, which means they're kind of getting rid of over time the application cache. So we're going to replace that. And if you run into that before we've implemented it in the release, just email it. Email us. We've already got it rolling and testing. People are using it. So I just want to mention that as it comes up. So for right now, to put this on TinyHost, what I do is zip these together. So let me compress these two. That's going to create an archive, and I can give it a specific name instead of the generic name. And then I'm just going to drag and drop this onto TinyHost. Oop, I can't do it yet because I want to create. There we go. And now I can drag and drop. And there it's got my file. And I'm just going to call this web app and launch. And it's going to take a few moments, and it will upload that and create the site. So let me hit view site. And you'll see the exact same thing that we see with local testing, except that it's now on the web, and it's got this nice short URL. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to switch over to the iOS simulator and open Safari. Now you have to do this in Safari on Mac, or if you're doing it on Android, you have to do it in Chrome, because it only works with a system's native browser. This is a very specific behavior. So you can see, you can compare here the iPad experience versus the desktop experience. This one, the iPad gives me instructions on how to install. So I click that button as it says, and there's my custom icon that shows up from the export, and I just choose the add to home screen option. And I click add, and here's my web app. Now, when I click that, it loads up the app. So instead of seeing this message or the install screen, I see the actual app, and I can click through and see the different sections. You can see there's animation within these states. And these just describe some of the benefits of using a web app. And then if I were to, I'm on my Mac here, I can hold Command and hit the arrow key and it'll rotate the device. So now you can see this is the portrait version. And as I mentioned, I designed this a little differently. So this has this sort of takeover menu. And then I see that. And the menu can be closed. So these are all interactive pieces that I built in InDesign. Let me choose a different section. And of course, I can rotate back. And what I mentioned was I lose that section. Like if I'm on branded experience and I switch over, I'm not on branded experience. That's where I would have benefited from creating each of these sections as a page in InDesign, because In5 would actually maintain that as I rotated the device. And I've designed this with large fonts. So hopefully just the portrait landscape, this would scale down to a phone pretty well. But if I wanted to have a separate phone layout, I could do that in InDesign just by creating additional alternate layouts here. I can create them all different sizes if I want to, and In5 will stitch them together. Now, let me go back and say there's one other place that I find is really useful for testing. In addition to the iOS simulator, and this is especially true if you're on a Windows machine and you don't have the iOS simulator, I really like Browser Stack. So Browser Stack gives you the option to load up a device. And so here, if I select iPad and say I want to test one of these iPads, let's try this one, and I'll open in Safari. It's going to connect me to a device with Safari. And once it does, I'll be able to paste in that same URL, right? Because that URL lives on the web, that tinyhost URL. So I hit return, and there's my web app, and I can try installing that here. And there it actually appears on that desktop. So there we go. So we've got a branded app living on the device. We've tested it. We can now test it in multiple devices with either of these tools. And we didn't have to write a lick of code. We didn't have to go through the App Store. We didn't have to get a developer certificate. We didn't have to do any of that. So now all I have to do to update this app is replace the files on the server. That is, I would say, a little bit easier if I'm managing my own server. But I believe with tinyhost, sorry, I'm struggling with the Zoom controls sitting on top of my browser tab here, so I can't actually get to my tabs at the moment. Let me stop this session and let's see if I can get back to some of these. All right, anyway, updating is basically as simple as replacing the files. Oh, one thing I do have in my notes here that I want to show you. Let me see if I can, boy, how do I get this? I can move that to the bottom. There we go. All right, sorry for that delay. Always struggle with the controls, which you guys can't see, but I can see the Zoom controls and they happen to sit up on top here. One other thing I want to mention that is really handy that I use internally all the time is I'm creating the web app, but I just want to test it on the desktop. I just want to see. So in InDesign with In5, I could obviously, when I export, I could change this so that instead of using the web app export, I could just select web. But rather than doing that, I can test the web app export that I already have, and I'll just add question mark, web app equals 0 to the end of the URL. And that's going to tell the In5 code, hey, just skip the install screen and show this to me like it's a web page. And then I can test this. excuse me. And I can test the responsiveness by scaling this down. And there's the portrait version. All right, so those are the basics of creating a web app. And let me go back to my slides. So we uploaded, tested. Now, as I mentioned, if you are new to interactive InDesign and you want to learn how to create the things that I was showing in there, the multi-state objects, the animation, the buttons, we have a free course, a jar.pro/in5 course. It's about 22 lessons. You can go through them online. You can sign up to our email version, and it'll send you those lessons one at a time, a few per week. There's also this paid course on a Jar Academy by Lori Rulin that is a more in-depth kind of video version of these specific InDesign interactivity steps, and it does get to the point of both creating a website and creating a web app at the end. So you might find this really helpful if you're interested in how you upload to a traditional host, and maybe even setting up your own hosting, having your own domain with your own domain name. There's a free course on a Jar Academy to do that as well. And then TinyHost, the one that I showed in the session today, that was like super easy, just drag and drop a zip file. We did a webinar on that a little while ago, so you can visit our YouTube channel and check the recording of that out and see just how easy that is. And then I mentioned at the beginning the idea of distributing your apps internally. So I know a lot of people come to the conclusion that they need to create an app because of something going on at their company. But what they actually need is internal distribution within the company, not a public-facing app. So if you're distributing to like a sales team or something like that, or people distributed across the country, across the world, say, you might actually benefit a lot more from a service called a sales enablement platform. So we have done webinars with a company called Vablet that can take, just like we created a zip file of our output and uploaded to TinyHost, you can create what's basically a zip file and upload it to Vablet. And we show that, we've got a couple of webinars recorded on our YouTube channel that shows how to use that. And then those are even better about being offline. So they get pushed to everybody's devices. The design and marketing team can control the content, upload it, decide whose devices it goes to. You can have groups that you assign it to, and then it automatically gets pushed to those devices and loaded offline. So those people have that content and they can use it for sales or for making recipes at franchise locations, whatever fits your company's needs. So that's the end of our official presentation. And like I said, I'm going to leave plenty of time now for Q&A. So what you can do to ask questions is to go down to the Zoom menu and click raise hand, and we will look for you and give you a chance to unmute. And then we would love to hear your questions about creating web apps, mobile apps, hosting, testing files. If you want to know how to get the iOS simulator on your Mac computer, we can talk about that. Or if you've got interactive InDesign questions, just go ahead and raise your hand there. You can also feel free to put questions in the chat and we will try and get to those. I see Stephen's hand up. Stephen, I'm going to give you a chance to talk.
All right. Can you hear me, Justin?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Listen, I just appreciate the webinar very much. I've been using N5 for a couple of years now, and specifically I've been making interactive textbooks with it, web ebooks. So my interest in an app would be supportive then of student learning. So I'm just trying to think through if I make this available on, say, my own website, then I would direct students to a link that they could download and then initialize the app from that website. Is that what I'm understanding correctly? Without using a an app store at all.
Yeah, exactly right. Yep, you can just put it on your web page and have like a landing page somewhere that directs them to that. Say here's the link to the app, and it'll
Okay.
point them to that page with the instructions, and they can load it up on their device.
Okay. Okay. That is quite interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the question, Stephen.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's the incredible ease of the web app.
Sorry, one other, I guess, follow up with that. You had talked about we have the option here of creating alternate layouts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, on that, I'm just trying to get to, oh boy. So N5 then has, here we go, document presets. So the N5 has all the different presets here. I'm not seeing presets. So I'm seeing them for iPhone and iPad. I'm not seeing them for Android phones.
Yes. So the challenge with Android is that they're made by so many different manufacturers
Okay.
that there's tons of different device sizes.
Ratios. Yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay.
So what you can do, there's a couple of things you can do. So by default, if you're creating responsive layouts, and there's maybe somebody on my team can find the link. There's a blog post called I think it's something about creating responsive layouts. It's got 3 videos on it, and it shows the different scaling options. So by default, when you create that, you can set up what we call desktop scaling. So it's just going to proportionally scale using JavaScript to maintain your layout. And what that'll do, let's say, thanks, Myra. Myra found it. It's in the chat there. What that will do is, if it doesn't fit the device perfectly, it will letterbox it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so, I mean, that can be okay in certain circumstances, depending on your design.
Sure.
And if you have multiple layouts, there's, hopefully one is going to fit. And kind of what you want to do is kind of target the most likely ones or the most flexible ones.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the easy version. And then if you look at that blog post on creating responsive layouts, the 3rd video in there is about using liquid layout. So if you combine the responsive layouts with liquid layout will actually fill the browser regardless. And
Okay.
that is not particularly useful if you use it by itself, because you could have a big desktop screen that's over 2,000 pixels. You could have a little phone screen that's like 400 pixels. But when you combine that with responsive layouts, what it does is fill in those little letterbox spaces. And if you have things that you want to always stay in, say, like the top right corner, you can pin it to the top right corner. And so that'll create a little elasticity in the layout, and it'll fill those letterbox spaces. And as long as you have enough different layouts, then you're going to have a nice fit regardless of the size. So I would take a look
Okay.
at that video, and that would show you if you need to target various Android devices, that might be a good way to do it.
Okay, yeah, super helpful. So if if I'm set up if I've got a layout that will work generally with a phone and then an iPad and the desktop, then the liquid can help kind of fill in those gaps and make it look okay.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
That's basically what I would recommend. I mean, that you pretty much hitting things well if you got a desktop, a tablet, and a phone. And you may, if you want to make it super fine tuned, you might have a vertical tablet, and then you might have a really tall, like some of the iPhones are really
Right.
narrow and tall. You might have that, but in most cases, you're not going to need that. Most designs, especially with a little liquid layout, you're going to find that 3 layouts covers just about everything.
Perfect. Awesome. Hey, thank you for that.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for the question, Stephen.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else, if you have a question, just go ahead and click the raise hand button and we will ask it. We will answer it, hopefully. Tasha, or Tazia, sorry if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly. You should be able to unmute and we'd love to hear from you.
Hello, I'm Tasha from Indonesia. I'm new user of In5 and already successful in downloading web app to my Samsung tab. And it works well when it's online, but and then when I turn off my Wi-Fi, I only can access my first page. And then when I'm clicking the button, I cannot go to the other page. Maybe you can suggest what I'm doing wrong?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it sounds like the offline caching isn't quite working for you. So the first thing to do is to make sure that setting is enabled, the offline caching, when you export. And I'll just go back there, make sure this is on. Now, there's a possibility that it is on, but the specific device and browser combination that you're using has already dropped support for that. That's one possibility. In that case, you can email us on our contact page or support@ajarproductions.com, and we'll get you that newer version that we're going to put in a release soon that will handle the offline caching through a JavaScript file.
So I've been working with her. She needs the service worker part.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So it sounds like that might be the issue. And then there are some other possibilities. If it's beyond the size limit, that could be an issue. But what we can do is with your specific file, we'll have a web developer look at it and figure out exactly what it is. But the first thing I would look at is adding the service worker file to the output. And then if it's something else, we can help you figure out what it is.
Okay, because I'm graphic designer and really don't know about coding, so I really need your help.
Yeah, totally. We have no expectation that you're going to do any coding, so we will take care of that end.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your question.
Justin, there was a question in the chat from Jessica, and she was wondering if there is an announcement piece to push messages out to staff, like if she's and I didn't know if that was something maybe Vablet or something, one of the sales enablement products could do.
Yeah, people have asked about push notifications in the past, and it's sort of a complicated thing to do on your own from scratch, because what you need to do is have some kind of back-end system where you're sending the message and actually pushing it out. It's not something that is like inherent to an app, right? Because the app it's not going to generate the messages. You need to be on the other end sending them through. Excuse me. So yeah, a system like Vablet is more likely to have something like that. And if you're talking about pushing things out to employees, that's the kind of thing that a sales enablement platform is built for, is kind of connecting employees. And so I would definitely reach out to them and see if their solution includes something like that, because I wouldn't be surprised if it does. All right. We are still open for questions, and so you can put them in the chat or raise your hand. I see Brad's got his hand up. So Brad, you should be able to talk.
Hi, Justin. I am putting something together that's really serving two purposes. One is for an internal app-like tool for salespeople to be able to present information to customers while in the home on an iPad. Mm-hmm. They also want to have the ability to be able to send. I've created this in a WordPress website currently, each page being being a separate document. Mm-hmm. I also want to be able to push this information out as a web page to customers. Mm-hmm. In other words, after a follow-up, then send out links to particular pages that were specific to the conversation. Mm-hmm. But it seems like that because there's two purposes, it seems like the web app isn't necessarily the right solution to that. And then a follow-up to that is, if I remember correctly, and I haven't taken a look since you talked about it, it seems like Vablet is a pretty expensive program, especially for a smaller company with, I think I've got maybe 20 salespeople, but not really super deep pockets.
Mhm.
So I'll go ahead and stop and let you respond to those.
Yeah. Those are good questions. And I think you're on the right track, and that, you could certainly create a web app and then have a web version that you send to the prospects, the potential clients. That is kind of there's a way that you can shoehorn that to kind of do it on the cheap. But it is going to be a lesser experience for sure. And it's going to be kind of more work creating those different versions. I do think for what you're describing, where you have salespeople going in person with devices, and then even, the digital leave behind of having them be able to send stuff to customers, like that is exactly what Vablet is built for. Like exactly. And so, if the price point is high for you, I would definitely talk to them and see if there's something that they can do that fits you guys. The other benefit of having a sales enablement platform is that it's going to have analytics tied to it. And so often, when something is tied directly to a sale, it's a little bit easier to budget for because you're making a return on that investment. And so that would be the additional benefit, is that you could see that system as it's working, and you could justify the money spent on it. So I would definitely get in direct contact with them and talk to them about your needs and see what they could do for you. Vablet, of all there's several sales enablement platforms out there, but they probably are going to, my guess from my experience is they're going to be among the most responsive to your specific concerns and might have more flexibility than somebody else. So I would definitely get in touch with them and talk to them, because it sounds like it's a really good solution for what you need. I know they have the ability to make certain things within the system public with links. So everything you're describing, I've seen them show as part of their platform. So I would definitely talk to them.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much for the question, Brad. Let's see. Anybody else has a question? Now's the time to raise your hand or post it in the chat. You got us here live, so take advantage of it.
We're all looking at Stephen's job. Stephen posted a link to he won an award for one of his ebooks that he did with In5. And so there's a link in the chat to that. Those of you that aren't in the chat yet, there's a link to a sample version. So,
oh, that's awesome. Stephen,
yeah.
Can I share that on screen?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's just a sample, just because I don't, Glossa House, who published it, actually, of course, owns it. So I can't share the full, but we do have a free sample that people can access, and it gives a good, good kind of overview of some of the interactive content.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice.
Tell me about it as I go through it.
Yeah, I mean, basic stuff. Of course, you can hyperlink from the contents area. And if you go a few pages down, I've got, so there's interactive video that's embedded into the, into there. I do have to say, of course, Flash is no longer supported. And so we've lost those controls that pop up. But it looks like that you can right click on a video in the new In5 stuff, right? You can right click and show controls. Yeah, perfect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I've had to tell my students, look for those if you need the controls.
Yep. So these are the controls that come with In5, and then this controls you see on top are the default browser controls.
Right. Yeah.
That you see. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. So Anyway, yeah, so this is a Greek textbook. I teach Greek at a university here in Alberta. And if you go to the next page, and I need to clean this up. On the other books, I haven't cleaned the sample up. I've gotten rid of the little bars there. So now it's an icon that you click on, and you'll hear a letter said, and then if you click on the numbers there, so these are just sort of letters there. If you've clicked on the right one, it gives you a nice little green check mark there. Oh, you finally got it. Last one, always the last one. So the interactive quiz part has been particularly helpful for students because it gives them, before they get to a quiz the next day, they can kind of test themselves to see how well they're understanding things. That was one of the things that the folks at Independent Publishers Awards were really quite happy with. Just a real simple button set up there.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, so I wanted to share just very, very short a sample there, but share some of the things that we're doing. Really appreciate the tool. I spent probably about 6 months looking because I had an idea of what I wanted to do, and no one was building anything that could do what I was wanting to do until I bumped into you folks. So really appreciate all the stuff you're doing for us.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing that with us. That's really cool. All right. Well, if we don't have any other raised hands or any questions, that might be a good way to go out. Oh, somebody else here. Carol. It's an interactive study. Oh, cool. Carol. Is this something we can show?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. All right. It's turning into a show and tell, which is great. Okay. There we go. Carol made this with In5 too, which I love because this is one of the great things about seeing what people are making. They kind of look nothing like each other. Stephen's piece has these marks of a book, right? You've got these page peels, and you've got this bar on the bottom, and page thumbnails, and all these tools. Carol's piece is, looks like a website, and it's got animation that scrolls down. And these are both created in InDesign, which I think is just really cool.
So it's great to see what people make with it.
Yeah, thank
That's
you
cool.
both, Stephen and Carol, for sharing.
Yeah, it's exciting. That's the first time in a live webinar we had people sharing their links. Very cool. That is lovely. It's a nice download button.
The animation's great too.
It is, yeah. Very cool. I'm gonna switch back so I can see what's going on in the chat. So cool. All right. Well, if anybody else.
One more thing, Brad just put, can you email the links to the training mentioned in the webinar? We put that all in the chat, did we not?
I tried to get the ones that we were talking about.
Yeah.
The Ajar Academy is in here too. If you scroll up, I didn't link to the specific courses, but just all of the courses are listed on Ajar Academy and the link above.
I can go back to the slides too. So basically there's 2 or 3 main ones. We've got our YouTube channel. We've got recorded webinars there. It's just youtube.com/Ajar Productions. And then all of these premium courses are on Ajar Academy. So the short link is academy.ajar.pro. And then there's the free course of written articles. And the short link for that is ajar.pro/in5 course. And yeah, we'll probably try and share some of that with the we send out the recording as well. And those are all in the chat. Yeah, Tasia has another question. Is there a way to convert the web app into an Android app? Okay, so that's a great question. What if you want to create a full-on mobile app? There are ways to do that with HTML, which means you can do it with N5. Unfortunately, the easiest way was taken away. Adobe had this tool called PhoneGap Build, and we had a course on the Ajar Academy, and it was like you just basically create some configuration files, and N5 helped you with that. Zip it, you upload it, and it starts building the apps for you, and it can take your certificates. That has gone away, like so many Adobe things. But there are alternatives. Unfortunately, they're not quite as simple, and we don't have documentation for them, and they may not be as cheap. So there is something called Ionic App Flow, which is very similar to PhoneGap Build. So that I would look that up, Ionic App Flow. And then I did hear of an N5 user who had actually done in Adobe Animate. You can create like an HTML container, and then there's a platform, I think it's called Harmon SDK. It's a continuation of the Air SDK. If you remember that back when Flash was the thing, Air was for creating desktop applications. And I believe it can cross compile to iOS. I don't know about Android. So those are a few ideas. If you basically look up platforms that can convert HTML to an app, that's what you want to use. The difference is when you're exporting with N5, let me share my screen. When you're exporting with N5, oh, and I've got this example that somebody just put in the chat. When you export here, instead of choosing web app, choose web as the output if you're going to build an app, because you don't want this. Let me take out the query string. You don't want this showing up, and you don't want the install screen showing up. You just want it to work like a web page, and then you're going to wrap it in an app package. So hopefully that helps to answer that.
And I want to jump in. If I understand correctly, and Tasha, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You were wanting to make an Android app for a tablet, not for phone, correct? I think she was doing it for a Samsung tablet.
Okay.
But that would still work as a web app, though, correct? I mean,
it should still work as a web app. Yeah. So you have that option, and you can create apps for tablets just as well as for phones. And I think I'm pretty sure Android might not even discern between a tablet and a phone. I don't even think the system cares.
Yeah, because my client want the app is offline in their tablet, so because it's confidential, they say.
So confidential. So it's probably
because it's in e-detailing for medical.
It's for medical.
To show from the salesperson to doctors when they sell.
Oh, okay. So this is another instance where you probably want so this is hard because you might have to convince them of this, but a salesperson showing something to a doctor is like a perfect usage of a sales enablement app. So you might want to look at Vablet for that, because that'll ingest the HTML that you've created with N5, and it will be loaded inside an app, and it'll be totally private, and it can be offline. So it'll do all those things that you're asking for. The only thing is you have to convince the client to use that, but that will do everything that you needed to do for that purpose. So that's where I would look for that.
Yeah, when I find N5 in internet, I think this is really solving my problem. That's why I want to make it work.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, I think you still use it, and I would use it with a sales enablement tool like Vablet, because I think that's gonna solve your client's like exact situation.
Yeah.
Those are heavily used in medical sales and pharmaceutical sales. So I did see in the chat, Carol was mentioning that she used a combination of liquid layout and responsive layouts. So I want to scale this and take a look at it. That's really cool. Nicely done, Carol. Thanks for mentioning that too. Yeah, just seamless between the different sizes. And then this other one, do we have Jeff's permission to show this on screen? And Carol gives credit to her coworker who did most of the build on that one. Well, yeah, good job, both of you. Jeff says we can share his on screen. Awesome. So let's take a look at Jeff's project too. Important news for school counselors. Cool. Got an animation there. And again, this is like 3 different projects, and they're all like completely different. Like this looks like it's kind of designed like spreads, but displaying, sort of almost as like PDF spreads. It's got the continuous scroll option with the drop shadow, and yet unlike a PDF, it's got functioning animation in it. So taking advantage of that and the social sharing. Cool. There's some animation and the ability to have the see Jeff's made use of the QR codes in there. Really cool. Thanks for sharing, Jeff. Jeff says it replaced a print newsletter that nobody read. Cool. So hopefully more people are seeing it now that it's online. That is great. All right. So I'm gonna say we're at 10 o'clock. So I'm gonna say last call for questions, or if you want to share anything. That's great to see what you guys are working on. So just let us know. I'm going to give it a minute. You can raise your hand or post something in the chat. Yep. It looks like we've answered most of the questions for now. If you have more questions, you can, of course, contact us by email. We're planning to do another webinar next week, so take a look out for that. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for sharing your really cool stuff. It's great to see the work that you're doing, and it's awesome. And hopefully you found the web app session today helpful. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. So thank you, everybody, and stay safe.